Hello, everyone. Good morning, good night, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Really excited to be doing this Twitter Spaces again. And today I have with me Lemniscap, Nicola from Lemniscap, and also Kiefer from Economics Design to join us. Nicola, can you introduce what Lemniscap does and what do you do at Lemniscap? And Kiefer later?
Absolutely.
Of you.
Sure. With pleasure. Thank you, guys, everybody, to tune in today. I'm Nicola, based in Hong Kong. I'm a principal at Lemniscap. Lemniscap is a crypto native investment firm. We've been around for a while. That's my actually fourth year in the Lemniscap house. We do mostly seed and pre-seed. Fully focused on crypto assets and blockchain. A pretty generalistic fund in a sense that we have covered pretty much all the verticals from the main narratives that you've seen and you're following in crypto. So one of them obviously is play to earn and the GameFi that we'll talk about later. And it's also interesting maybe to know why we were so deeply not concerned but interested really to see what was behind all of this new movement and the potential, right? That's pretty much our job and goal here, to see where narratives and where new trends are going and where they can.
And Kiefer, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Kiefer Zhang. I work as a crypto economics consultant at Economics Design. And that generally means that we're working with a wide variety of clients in the crypto space to make sure that they're setting up their economies in such a way that they're actually aligning them with their long-term goals, as that's really going to create the economy that's beneficial to the most people, making sure that the participants are actually able to have an economy that's really adding value. And we've worked in the past a lot with projects in the DeFi space, but we're really following along with this huge explosion in the play-to-earn gaming side and working with AAA quality gaming startups. And to give a little bit of background on how I came into this space, I've been essentially obsessed with game economies since 2014, back before NFTs even existed. So looking at game item trading in Counter-Strike, Team Fortress 2, those sort of things, and just realizing that there's a lot of room for blockchain to revolutionize the play-to-earn gaming space through NFTs, increasing the ability for users to own their assets within the metaverse, and really looking forward to helping push the space forward and creating more robust gaming economies.
So before we get started, what are we doing over here? What are we chatting about? The thing about this P2E space is that it's very complicated. When we talk about game design, each game is a whole universe on its own. It has its own population growth, its own economic transactions, its own economic activities, its own monetary policy. This is not just blockchain games, but games in general. And so this is very complicated. One of the very difficult things in general for games is game design, gameplay design. There are plenty of books and research on there doing gameplay design. And a lot of these reports written by other people have also written by other research firms is talking about what is P2E game, introduction to P2E games, how is P2E games different from traditional games. But the other aspect to gameplay is the economics design of these games. When you design your economic system, that is the parameters of your world. The next thing that you need to do is to design the rules, the economic policies, fiscal policies, monetary policies, because that will help to make sure that your ecosystem is robust. And this is exactly what we're focusing on. So we spent about maybe 5 months focusing on working on this report, and it is a 70-page report. It's free for anyone to read. Just go to econteric.com/P2E, I think, or just go to econteric.com and you can find the report over there. So because it's a very, very deep report, it's a huge report. We have so many different sections. We're going to split this up into a few different sessions that we'll do on Twitter Spaces. because if you share all the 70 pages at once, it's going to be very overwhelming. So in this session, primarily, we want to focus a little bit more about why we did this report, who did we analyze, what is a main takeaway that you can take, what's the main takeaway from this report, how is the framework used? So you know that we've been using the economics design framework to analyze DeFi. We're using the same framework in a different way to analyze P2E. So we want to talk a little bit about that. And we'll get started with understanding the market of the various personas to consider. So this is the overview that you can expect in our session today. So let's get started with why did we do this report? In your own words, Kiefer.
Yeah. So looking at some of the game economies that we're starting to see be created, developed, just be in the early planning stages, as there's a lot that still need to come out. A lot of the economies seem like they haven't had a lot of thought put into them. And from some of these users, it may be because that they're not properly aware of the importance of economics design and how that will affect the long-term viability of their project. But I think the primary reason is mostly just because there's not enough resources out there to help guide projects in how do they actually set up these various components of their economies to make sure that they're creating the incentives needed that are actually lining up with the goals of their projects and how they want the various economic participants to be interacting. So with this report, we really wanted to help provide this structure and a guideline of recommendations that these projects can follow, and also for the other participants. So if you're an investor or a player, you want to be able to understand if the games that you're interested in are actually putting a good amount of thought and into their economy, and it's actually set up in a way that you can expect it to follow through in the road and follow through on the roadmap that they laid out in terms of how the economy will look in the long run. And it's really important because as we're moving from a traditional game economy to one where there is a open market for real value of assets, there's money at stake. We will have billion-dollar markets, and a lot of these designers are coming in knowing how to create a great game, but not necessarily having a good understanding of what it takes to properly design a million or billion-dollar economy. So we wanted to do everything we could to help this upcoming wave, this upcoming player and gaming market be the best one that it can be.
Awesome. Well, I'll double down on what you said, Kiefer. I would actually, start from something very interesting you pointed out in your very initial introduction when you said we looked at quite a bit of DeFi. Well, we did as well. And we looked at together with economics design previously at DeFi. And when you look at the gaming space, you realize that it's completely different in a sense that the incentives, in a sense, to participate on a DeFi platform or DeFi applications, or anyway on any sort of interaction you might have with a protocol in that angle, it's pretty straightforward. You do it for an economic incentive, right? And purely for that. While with the interesting space that the gaming vertical is completely different, right? And we'll touch later on these, the players, builders, investors, obviously NFT collectors, and we see what the NFT basically ecosystem brought how many players into our world. So the main reasons why, as Lemniscap, we wanted to do this was really to, of course, give something back to the community, in a sense, create something very useful for teams and builders that really want to create something meaningful in the space, but also for really going to the root of of those designs and those new ecosystems and see what made sense and what made not sense, right? Because on our perspective at a moment, we started making this report maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and it was really a tsunami of projects coming our way, all all of a sudden working on a new game or a new metaverse or something like that. And on our hand, our job is to really see the value behind it and see what's worth spending our time, right? And we needed to have a framework. We needed to have a way to evaluate those things, and it didn't exist. So as usual, what happens with Lisa, we try to say, look, nobody have done it. It won't be easy, but we feel like we have to do it, and that's how it started, basically. So that's the motivation.
Yeah. So to summarize, this report can help two key types of people. The first one is developers. If you're a developer, you're trying to figure out, how do I create a P2E game? How do I create a P2E ecosystem? What are the building blocks I need to consider? How do I even get started with the design? This report is for you. The other perspective is, as an investor, you want to know, how do I analyze what are the fundamental drivers, what are the fundamental value, to see if the design makes sense or not. Gameplay is one thing, game aesthetics is one thing, but if the economics doesn't make sense, there's no longevity to the game. It doesn't make sense to do value investing. So from that perspective, we're doing this report to target two very specific types of people: the designers, developers in the space, as well as the investors, retail, institutional investors. Doesn't matter. We're looking at fundamental value of this entire space. Great. So to do research, we definitely need to figure out who to analyze, who to do case studies on, who to benchmark. And we analyze a good amount of protocols. Nicola, do you want to take us through some of the protocols, and then Kiefer can continue with the other protocols? Just a general overview of who we analyze.
Sure. Well, the idea behind this was to be quite comprehensive on the games, on different models, and be quite inclusive in a sense, right? And that was literally the idea behind it. Few names, we analyzed actually 12. I can start with you if you like. We started with the Sandbox, and type city building, pretty straightforward. A lot of people are talking about this, mostly focused on lands and then their non-fungible tokens. RPG game Illivium. It will use Immutable X. It's really strong on their NFTs. Very interesting use of ZK rollups. This is really one a lot of people are quite excited about it. I would mention then maybe Guild of Guardians and Dark Forest. This is something, actually, Dark Forest, we looked at it quite a while ago. It came across our radar, and I have to be honest, it was quite hard at the very beginning to understand what they really wanted to do. It was the very beginning, nothing was up and running. It's a very strong community driven game in a sense. It's basically a game where you have an incomplete information, in a sense that you are trying to strategically conquer a space, and basically you have to project a planet across the space. It's quite interesting. It's a very strategic game, and they've been a very, very avant-garde, I would say, on the usage of the technology.
So I mentioned Axie Infinity. That's another project that we looked at, and this was a good case study of the scholarship model, where you have users who are interested in, who have the bankroll to own an asset, but may not necessarily be the one who wants to be playing it, and then also providing an earning opportunity for a another class of players, the scholars, who are essentially employees and are earning through that actual gameplay activity. And another kind of example we can look at of how a game is can explore a unique economic model is touching back with Illuvium, another AAA quality game that Nicola mentioned. Is with that one, you can also explore the pay to win aspect by having separate areas within the game, separate arenas that have different ways of dealing with the pay to win issue, like having one where everything is equal for regardless of how much you spent on your character, and then having another one where the whales can have really good assets, pay as much as they want, and battle it out. And so that's something that game designers can look at for having a balance between high value assets that whales want to purchase and those that and still keeping things equal for regular players.
Great. What we're looking at is to compare between UGC, monetary policy, revenue model, and we're not just looking at AAA games, but just games in general. Just try to give a piece of what's the framework or what is the landscape of this P2E game right now. And from there, we apply all these different protocols and explain the various concepts that we're sharing. So now let's start to dive deeper into the report itself. What would you guys say is the one main takeaway from this report for you?
I can start. Well, main takeaway, I would say it's the whole process we went through ourselves, and I think we try our best to put it in words on building a framework. So the best takeaway is the clarity that we put on, I mean, that we tried, of course, but I'm being optimistic here in a sense that we did nail down a pretty nice framework. The clarity that we came up with, okay, there's an opportunity, there is a game, there is a metaverse, there is an economy, right? What do you want to look at? Who are the players that are having a word? Who can do what? What it's interesting to see and what should be considered. So this to me is really the main takeaway, is a framework that once you read the report, you spend your time that you want to, you can dive deeper on one section or another. But when you go to play the next game, I think, or you want to buy a token of a next game, right? Or you want to buy a land of a next protocol and game. Well, you will have a framework to think about, well, wait a moment, how are, NFT collectors involved here? Why an investor would buy this token? Why would a developer interested to start this, this part of the partnership with another protocol, or why a builder would do this instead that would do that? So I think the main takeaway is the clarity that we come up with building a framework, which again, it's way more interesting than what we might find in a very, simple, intuitive DeFi protocol. Here, there are way more different, I mean, we'll touch later on personas, but different really angle of people that come to the game to interact with each other. Some people might not really care about the economics, right? They might just care about the game. Some people you see on scholarships, on guilds, and on so many people that are actually playing Axis, they might really not care about the game, but just about the economics, right? And think about on this perfect storm where investor sits and where developer sits, right? Where they want to start something, they want to do well, they want to have an impact, and that's what's really, really exciting on my hand, at least.
Awesome. And Kiefer, what is the takeaway for you?
So the takeaway that I have from this report is that there's such a wide variety of ways to design an economy. It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. So just because a game designer saw that a particular game, say Axie Infinity, has been successful with a particular sort of economic model, doesn't mean that that's what is going to lead to the best results or even good results at all for whatever game they're considering working on. So it's important that the economics for that game are specifically aligned with that project's goals, because different projects are going to have different goals for how their economy should act, what they're aiming for in the long run. And this applies to the way that the project and the NFT owners within the ecosystem earn revenue. It applies to the general business model, so around if this is a free-to-play or a pay-to-play game. And in some cases, it's important to note that some games aren't fit for a play-to-earn monetization system at all. And so that's something we discussed a bit more in the within the report, kind of deciding what kind of games are applicable for this sort of play-to-earn monetization model. And depending on your long-term goals, we have a series of questions you can look through and their corresponding responses on what sort of general economic setup should you be looking at so that you can actually align with your long-term goals.
That's right. In our report, we also have a decision tree metrics, basically questions for you to ask. As you answer them, what are the different next steps and how can you design your monetization model from there? And for me, my main takeaway was in every economy, economies exist and markets exist because you create value. If no value is created, nobody will join your market. There will be no transactions. So if there is value created in the game, how does that impact the monetary policy for long-term robustness? That was my main takeaway that we discussed very in-depth in section 3 of the report. So to summarize, the main takeaways for 3 of us over here right now is that with P2E games, it's slightly different from just DeFi, where it's a lot broader. There are a lot more perspectives to consider. There are a lot more moving parts to consider. There's no one size fits all, and every economy mechanism is very specific to what you want to achieve in your economics. So in that case, what we built is a framework to figure out how to get started looking at the design, what are the different things to consider in the design. And then how is that tangible? What are the tangible results to look at? It is how does that impact the monetary policy of all the various tokens that we have in the space? So that being said, what is this framework that we're talking about? We talk about this consideration framework, this way to start thinking and designing the system. Can you guys share more about what is this framework?
Sure, I can start giving a go at least. Well, we, if you remember, thought about it quite a bit, right? And we eventually went for continuity, right? We were always extremely excited to follow a pretty robust framework that you built first and foremost at Economics Design, and we wanted to make sense of play to earn also in this framework. So the idea was to fit all those economics interactions and all those mechanisms basically on the 3 main pillars: market design, mechanism design, and token design. Of course, as we said, this is way less black and white, right? And this is way less purely economical. There are way more side factors that we had to consider. For example, in market design, mostly the parameters that we looked at, it was basically how the games could be customized and how the participant can have an impact in the game itself. So one of the main topic that we took at length in the report is the user generated content, right? This is massive, because you have builders, which are a new sort of participant in the picture here, and they have a massive role. It's an open door to creativity, and one way that I always try to to put some clarity on my mind is, this is a creator economy. It's a little bit of Web3, it's a little bit of NFTs, it's a little bit of everything, but it's a creator economy. We're opening the space to creative people to come and have economics to do what they love to do. So that was one very important part. Another part on the market design was about basically NFTs and in-game usability. Well, that pretty much talks about, okay, you have something that it has a value on the game, but it can also has a value outside the game, right? So with market design, we always try to see a little bit of the context of the game, the context of the market, the context of the protocol we analyze, see how it is connected with the outside world, right? That's the idea, Lisa. And on this same vertical, there is also value creation that you mentioned, and this is very important, right? People come because there is value, and people stay because there is value. I'll maybe touch, and then I can give it away to Kiefer on the mechanisms design. This is particularly, one thing that was particularly interesting on my hand, it was the network effect. Then we touched at length governance and revenue models, but I think Kiefer will be expanding on that. On the network effects, why did I want to dive deep on this? Because it's what we look for as investors. We don't want things that are they live on a silos or they're like in a vacuum, in a sense, right? You want openness. You want different personas interact with them. They want to see economies of scales. You want to see expansions, and the network effects are basically the difference between something still and something dynamic, right? And that was for me the most interesting part of one of the most interesting part of the mechanism design, which are the rules basically that govern the infrastructure in the first place. And maybe Kiefer, you can expand a bit still on mechanism design if you like.
So Kiefer, before we start talking a little bit more in mechanism design, token design of the framework, the framework has 3 different pillars: market design, mechanism design, and token design. Nicola has talked about market design and some aspects of mechanism design, which are consideration points when it comes to investment. Kiefer, you want to continue a little bit more on what are the other things that we talked about in the framework?
Yeah, so looking a bit at the mechanism design, so these are the rules for how users are going to be interacting with each other within the ecosystem. So a really key component of this is governance. And this can look different for different games, because we're in a space that has a high value on decentralization, but you're also balancing against what sort of controls do there need to be, especially early on, to make sure that the kind of decisions are made, that the decisions made are going to be best for the long-term benefit of the game and the game economy. So we're seeing some games that are trying to pass control over a lot of these governance decisions to the community very early on, and some that are keeping a lot of tight control. And it's not necessarily that one is better than the other. Again, this is a scenario where it's important to think of what are the ideals for that community that they're trying to build out. What are their long-term goals? And it's important that these ideals and governance mechanisms are set out early on and clearly communicated to all the participants so that they can have a way of moving forward and expressing their ideas on how users should be able to interact with each other and how decisions will be made for the long run benefit of that project. And then you also want to look at the ways that value is moving through the ecosystem. So how are participants earning revenue? And so this could be through users earning direct revenue from owning assets within the game. Perhaps they own some land and as such are earning some income based off of in-game activity. It could be rental revenue, so similar concept of owning land, but they're renting out their asset to another participant, or having some sort of employee or scholarship program. So you're having a specific mechanism where users are able to transfer value between each other and recognize benefits from the asset that they hold and create an opportunity for players who otherwise could not afford that asset.
Yep. So that really summarizes the economic design framework. Again, the framework looks at 3 different pillars: market design, mechanism design, and token design. Market design, these are the parameters of the game design itself. What can be customized? What can be changed? What are the parameters that can be set? How can people change that? So here we are looking at UGC, user-generated content. We're looking at NFT and in-game usability. And we're looking at value creation. When we're having all these parameters in place, how is value created in the market? The second thing we look at is mechanism design. As Kiefer mentioned, the mechanism design are the rules for users to interact with each other within the ecosystem. Think of it as laws in a country. We're defining these rules. Specifically, we're looking at governance, revenue models, and network effects. Thirdly, we're looking at token design. So token design is the token itself. How does the value interact with the ecosystem, and how does that affect the in-game assets like NFTs? Here we spoke very specifically about monetary policy, because the game itself, the treasury, the DAO, it's a central bank. How do they manage the monetary policy to make sure that it balances with any demand that you have in the economy? This is really, really key, not just for crypto games, but for non-crypto traditional games as well. Monetary policy is key for the entire project to be surviving long run. So that being said, that is the framework of that's the framework that we have discussed. We use this framework in DeFi as well, and you realize that the same pillars exist, but the application is kind of different. So let's move a little bit to the next topic, which is the first section of our report on the personas for economics design consideration. And I think this is talking about the personas itself is really, really interesting, because this is something it's a bit different from DeFi. And this is where we're looking at these economies as proper countries, proper ecosystems. In a country, it's not just one economic agent in the space. For DeFi, it's usually very specific economic agents. For example, liquidity providers and traders. These are the 2 key economic agents in a decentralized exchange. In a P2E space, it's slightly different, because in a P2E space, you have so many dynamic types of users, so many interesting facets of demand in the economy, just demanding services and providing services in the economy. And I think the most interesting stuff, so we talk about 5 different personas: players, builders, developers, investors, and NFT collectors. They're all very interesting in their own rights. And I think, to me, the thing that really stood out was players. Because players in this sense, this is where it's slightly different from traditional games, I think, where players have a little bit more control of how they want the economy to change, how they want the economy to be shaped. And It's almost like giving citizens voting rights to make a change in your government. And I think that's really, really powerful. So in the report, we share a little bit more about how market design, mechanism design, and token design will affect the way players consider whether to join this platform or not. And having more of these metrics to think about whether you want to invest your time in playing game A versus game B versus game C, I think that was very insightful. What about you, Nicola?
Very interesting, very interesting. Well, me personally, builders, and you say, well, that's very interesting. How is not possible? There is, is not investors. Well, I think builders it's something very innovative. Why? Because of course, players now can earn. They have a different saying. It is obviously a different way of playing, right? When you can also earn, and that's fair enough. Developers, well, you obviously have teams, right? And now those teams have different economics. They have different potential partnership that they can do this with. They have a lot of different personas, right? That they have to consider. Then, of course, there are investors, and one probably this is for Kiefer. NFT collectors obviously are the fifth one that we touched and we analyzed. But builders is, in my opinion, the new entry here. It's the it's that part of the equation where you give, as I mentioned before, creativity, an open field to come in and really not revolutionize the game, but really give an impact. And we see quite a bit of new models where really the builders and the user generated content is a backbone of the projects. Like think about metaverses as a service, for example, right, where you can buy the land, have somebody basically building on your land and develop stuff on your land, and then that land has an increased value. You can host events, you can build whatever you want on top of it, you can do the usage of it. That can be an NFT itself. So I think builders now, with all the creativity, the IP complications that comes with that, the whole basically relationship with the developers that they're gonna have, the whole impact that they will have with the community and the ecosystem. That's extremely exciting, because think about it. Axis was, a revolution in terms of what players could do, right? But I think the new ecosystems and the new metaverses and the new games we are seeing, they will open to builders really a new door for their specific creativity. And it could be of any kind, right? And that's really what I look forward to be honest. It's not going to be easy, because there are a lot of components. Just think about the protection of the rights, if there are any, or how easy or how hard would be to copy stuff, and it's going to be a challenge, but definitely a super interesting one to see. So that's definitely my favorite among the five of the personas. What about you, Kiefer?
Yeah, it's really interesting here how and important to examine the different personas that we're looking at, because going from essentially a traditional game to a play to earn game, you're moving from just having the players, developers, and potentially builders for something traditional like Roblox, to having those that are really looking at what sort of value exists in this economy. And now that we have open markets of real value assets, we're having really large economies, and with that comes the people who are interested in investing and the people who are interested in collecting the important assets. So I definitely come from that side, and it's been really a joy watching this opportunity come up where you can have true control over real value assets. So these NFT collectors, they're one of the things that they're really looking at is what sort of long-term attractiveness and sustainability is there within this economy. Because status is a big thing when it comes to collecting high-value digital assets. So they want to look at what's the visibility of this project? Is this something that's going to last for a long time? But also, what sort of utility is there within these assets that I'm holding for a long period? What sort of impact can they have on governance? And on the investor side, this is something that game designers want to be looking at heavily because these investors are going to be able to fund a lot of your growth. One of the big revelations for blockchain-based gaming is that you can do a lot of funding through selling NFTs. You don't necessarily have to dilute your equity, or maybe not as much. Look at something like Star Atlas. They've raised a huge amount of money just through NFT sales. So these are essentially new personas that are created by the play-to-earn gaming space that they definitely should be paid attention to in terms of what specifically they're looking for. And that's something we've laid out in detail in the report.
Awesome. And to summarize what we have talked about so far, why do we do this report? Really, we're doing this report from two perspectives. One from a developer designer perspective and one from an investor's perspective. From a developer designer's perspective, we understand that the economics of a play-to-earn game is so complex, it's so difficult, it's so complicated. And we want to help firstly, we want to analyze what's going on in the space and then build a framework to help designers, developers, and economists to design the economics for these play-to-earn games. From an investor's perspective, we want to help investors to analyze what is the fundamental value and to see if the design makes sense or not. And if there's longevity in this entire ecosystem, you can have very good gameplay, but if your economics is not robust, if your economics are not aligned, this is where the value just does not get realized. So who do we analyze? We analyzed 12 various protocols. They're all complex gameplay. We have a range of AAA to generally high quality games. And we compare, again, across their UGC, governance, revenue model, monetary policy, all these different aspects. The main takeaway from this report, to summarize a few of our points, is that we want to define the value created so that it can impact the design of monetary policy for the tokens. How do we do that? We realize that there is no model, a one-size-fits-all model, because each economic policy is really customized towards the longevity and the long-term goals of each game. So we want to build a framework to design the game. It can be used as a guiding map when you're designing and thinking about what are the different parameters to consider and to look at the various moving parts of this very complex economy, very complex game. We use the framework that we have always been using for the DeFi economic models, which is the economic design framework, looking at market design, mechanism design, and token design. In market design, we're looking at defining the parameters of highly customized game. In mechanism design, we're looking for the rules where users interact with each other. And in token design, we're looking at how these value can be redistributed and how does it incentivize the interaction of various agents in your space. And lastly, to get started on the entire report, we talked about the 5 various personas, which are different consideration points, and we discussed them in relevance to market design, mechanism design, and token design. We looked at players, builders, developers, investors, and NFT collectors. As we move on to section 2 and section 3 in the report, we'll share how they do, how they make sense, how does it all come together to build the entire framework. So, Kiefer, what can we expect in the next session? What can we expect to hear about in our next Twitter session when it comes to the report?
I think we might have a pause 1 second with Kiefer. I can take this.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, can take this. Well, we want to leave obviously something for the for the next tweet space session. Mostly, I think what we will cover, starting from the core, a lot of what you mentioned on value creation, value distribution. That's really one of the most important thing and interesting thing on the market design. Around the mechanism design, I think we'll touch a bit more on governance and on revenue models. I gave scratched the surface basically of the network effects, but a lot of things and a lot of models are being studied in the report. So we can definitely dive deeper on those. And I think the coolest part of it is that we really sit down and try to find the most valuable input for the developers we wanted to help, which is a mental map, right? It's a simple tool where you can ask yourself the questions about the model that you want to build, and with that framework you can really have a easier path through your design. So there are a lot of recommendations, there are lots of point on the conclusions basically on how to do best, and we really scratched the surface of what we touched on the report itself. A lot of on the user generation content, a lot of on the governance, a lot on the monetary policies, right? Because eventually all of these bring to build a better model, right? So I think the next one is going to be super exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the next one, the next sessions that we're going to have is going to get more complex, more complicated. And that's why this session is to have an introduction of what we're going to talk about, to be a primer for you to expect what to expect next. That being said, we're also reaching the end of our session. So thank you very much, you guys, for joining us and listening to our research that we have done for many months now. So if you can follow Economics Design and Lemniscap so that you can get notified about the next space that we're talking about, that will be great. In the next space, we're going to talk more specifically into how this framework is being used. What do we look at in market design? What do we look at in mechanism design? What do we look at in token design? And then next step, the sessions after, we're going to look at how does all these different design pillars affect building the economic models. So we talk about interaction between market design and mechanism design, token design. How do they all interact together to start building a very robust system? Then we'll also talk about some recommendations of a decision tree, where if you have something, what are the next steps to consider, and what kind of revenue model, for instance, that is most suitable for your gameplay. As Kiefer mentioned before, this is not a one-size-fits-all model. This is a framework, this is a decision tree metric, this is a flow chart, a value flow chart for you to consider how to design your economic model. So go download the report, go follow us. We'll speak again very soon on the next session, and we'll continue deep diving into all these different interesting aspects that we talked about.
Well, thank you for hosting as usual. This wouldn't be possible without your energy, without your constant presence. We do this week after week, and we're there because of you. So thank you very much. I'm really proud that we together are pushing the space forward, right? This is why we do it, and we do it for the community, and that's fantastic. Thanks again, everybody.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, listening to us here. I just want to say I am super interested in this space, and for anyone that wants to continue the discussion on planar and gaming economies or anything related to that, feel free to DM me. Always happy to chat.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day or evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you are. We'll speak again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for staying throughout this entire video. If you're interested to learn more and you want to join the community, do check out our Discord, check out our Academy, and you get to watch these videos for free as well, without any ads. And also grab the book that I've talked about earlier on. The book summarizes a lot of what we're trying to build, what we're trying to design, and the different aspects that can be changed during the entire design process. We also just launched Econteric. Econteric is really economics plus esoteric because this space is so complicated and so difficult. What we want to do is to make it easier for anyone to come and learn and be part of this system. So in Econteric, we are breaking down the different analytics and different data to give you more insights to understand the robustness from a very fundamental level of the health of this ecosystem. So check out econteric.com and I'll see you there. Bye!